This one's about I don't want to call him my favorite friend, but modern people, we move around and we lose people. They're our friends, and then they're not. Not necessarily because we had a big fight. They just we moved and they moved and life moved on. And sometimes you talk about people like that, and if I was going to name one person that I lost a friend, but I kind of wish I still knew. This is the guy that I would talk about. He would be my most irritating, most missed and long lost friend. I met him in grad school. He was short, a little short, fat guy, bald, going bald. He had this sort of scraggly red beard. I always kind of thought if Falstaff in Shakespeare had an illegitimate kid, uh, maybe it would look like this guy. He had a limp, or one leg was shorter than the other. He was like a walking encyclopedia. I think he was the smartest person I ever met in my life. And I'm old now, and I've met all kinds of professors and all kinds of people with PhDs. And I still think maybe he was the smartest. He had knowledge, detailed knowledge about an enormous range of things. I don't know, like Massachusetts politics, the Kennedys, why people worship the Kennedys, medieval history, Shakespeare. It was just astonishing. His favorite thing though was poetry, and you don't meet a lot of people that just adore poetry, worship poetry, and he memorized poetry. I bet there were like 1,000, 2,000 poems that he could quote from memory. I don't know if you've ever seen a Norton anthology, these enormous books full of famous poems. You could open up the Norton anthology to almost any poem and say a couple lines of it, and he would not only know the name of the poem and the poet, but he could recite the rest of the poem. I had never in my life met anybody like that. I loved literature. I tended to think of myself as better read than most people, most grad students anyway. But compared to this guy, I was an idiot. And man, I could not memorize. I could not memorize poems. Even one little sonnet was too much. This guy, one time I was at a party, everybody's drunk, and people started talking about T.S. Eliot, and he just adored T.S. Eliot. And the most famous poem by T.S. Eliot, well, one of the most famous poems is called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The other guy starts reciting it, and my friend, he started reciting it. They did the whole damn poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, from the first line to the last line, like a duet. It was that was the kind of thing he could do. He was a Christian. He had this kind of sense of himself that he was like embattled. He was surrounded by enemies, stupid people that were like enemies. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was so intelligent, so intellectual, so well read, and yet he was a Christian, kind of an old fashioned Christian. I think in a way he needed enemies, and he found them everywhere in our at our university. The professors, a bunch of heathen atheists, didn't even know their own topics that well. He would argue. The other graduate students, oh my God, he thought they were morons, liberals, feminists, communists. He had long lists of people he couldn't stand. He especially hated what he called workshop poets. The university I went to was famous for educating talented young writers, playwrights and novelists and story writers and poets. One time, I kind of think maybe that he tried to get into the poetry workshop and failed, and after that he hated them. One time he led a group of us up to where the workshop was, and they had like a closet full of poetry, and these were like Xeroxed poems that were going to be, I assume, discussed by various workshop classes. And he started snatching these poems off the shelf, and he would like read them to us and mock them and explain why they were so horrible and so typical of workshop poets. Um, his he was a great storyteller. I like to tell stories. I don't think I'm as good a storyteller as he was. We learned all about his mother. She was like this hillbilly, beautiful, and his cruel father was a lawyer, I think like a prosecutor on the East Coast, and he was ferocious and argued with the kids at the dining room table and. He told us this story one time. It was Christmas time, and Dad was in his study, and my friend and his brothers were making too much noise, and the father came out and he said, "Okay, okay, I told you to be quiet. You're not quiet. Now you're going to get it. No Christmas for you." And he went over to the Christmas tree, this like 8 foot tall Christmas tree, and he dragged it off its stand and he dragged it out of the house, dragging all these, cords full of, Christmas lights, and he threw it out into the front yard. We're like, "Oh my God, did that really happen? Your dad did that?" And the mom, the beautiful hillbilly mom, she comes home and she sees there's the whole Christmas tree laying in the front yard in the snow, and she comes in and she says to the husband, "You can't take Christmas away from little boys." Man, he was full of stories like that. He had this amazing brother who was like a world-class bird expert, flew around in the Amazon rainforest in airplanes. Years later, I heard his brother actually died. He and a friend flew right into a mountain somewhere in South America on some kind of adventure, trying to discover more species of birds. I didn't know anybody else like him. He seemed more brilliant to me, more interesting to me, more fascinating than everyone else. I thought of him as a genius. I think all of us who loved him, we all thought of him as he was like our genius. But he never seemed to finish anything. He had all these great plans. They were just these spellbinding projects that he was going to do and that he had started. He was going to write a cycle of songs, or he was going to write a cycle of poems, or he was going to write a great monumental book about Shakespeare, or Alexander Pope or something, and he never ever seemed to finish any of these things. And sometimes I thought it was like he's too smart. It's like he's got so many ideas that he can't really fit them into like a little song or a little poem or a little book. He eventually left us. He got, I think, too big for our university. He went to an Ivy League university, ended up in New York teaching there. Finally, I heard he wound up at a little Catholic, right-wing Catholic academy somewhere in the South. He never really did live up to all the dreams I think that we all had about him as, I don't know, the next T.S. Eliot, but he was our great poet. He was our great storyteller and madman. He drove me nuts. He overwhelmed me. He made me laugh. For a while, he was my best friend, and to this day, I miss him.